The boardroom on the 42nd floor went silent. Not the respectful silence of surprise, but the stunned silence of people who had never seen a man refuse them before. Alistair Carrington's hands remained folded on the polished mahogany table. His sister Margaret stopped mid-sip of her water. His son Preston froze with his pen hovering over a coffee cup rim. For one full second, no one moved. Then Alistair tilted his head, the way a predator does when prey suddenly grows teeth. "Mr. Chase," he said slowly, "I don't think I heard you correctly." "You did," Julian replied. He did not sit back down. 24 hours earlier, Julian had walked into this same room believing he was selling his company, Vantage Data Systems, built from a one-room office above a laundromat in Queens. 8 years of sleepless nights. No inheritance, no family name, no degree from the right school. By 34, he had made Vantage the backbone of enterprise data for 62 Fortune 500 companies. The Carringtons had come to him. He made sure to remember it. Now he understood they had never come to buy Vantage. They had come to bury Julian Chase inside it. The meeting the day before had been a slow, surgical dismantling. Preston had opened with a smirk. "Self-taught, correct? No formal background in distributed systems? Fascinating." He said fascinating like a man describing a circus act. Margaret had followed with velvet condescension. "Extraordinary numbers usually have extraordinary explanations. Mr. Chase, sometimes those explanations are not in the room." And Alistair, gray hair combed back, voice smooth as oil, had delivered the true blade. A quiet engine, someone else, they suggested, must have built the real architecture. Someone off the cap table, someone with a name. They offered $10 billion on one condition. Julian would keep his founder title, but an operating chief of their choosing would run the company, the public face, the real power. Julian would become a ghost in his own building. "Think of it as a partnership of strengths," Margaret had said. "You provide the vision. We provide the maturity." Julian had not slept that night. He sat in his office with the Manhattan skyline burning orange through the blinds. A single sheet of paper on his desk. 2 columns, one for accepting, liquidity for his team, European expansion, a name that opened Washington doors. One for walking, shorter but heavier. Marcus Webb, his CFO since the laundromat days, had come in at 1 a.m. "They don't want the company," Marcus said. "They want to own you. No, you've got until 10 a.m. Julian looked at the window. They'll find out tomorrow what they're really buying. Now, the next morning, it was 10 a.m. The Carringtons had returned to the same chairs, the same water glasses filled to the same height. They wanted the morning to feel like a continuation, not a reset. But Julian had rewritten the script before he walked in. "Mr. Chase," Alistair said, "I trust you used the evening well." "I did." "Then let's not waste time. Have you considered our proposed structure?" Julian opened the folder Marcus slid across the table. He removed 3 pages, one for each Carrington. "This is a summary of Vantage's last 48 months. Revenue, retention, infrastructure expansion, patent filings, every metric time-stamped against personnel changes. You'll see every inflection point lines up with hires I made, decisions I signed, and architecture I authored." Preston scanned the page. He set it down without finishing. "Documentation isn't character, Mr. Chase. We can read a chart. What we can't read is whether the chart belongs to you or to the people you happen to be standing next to. I just told you it belongs to me." "You did?" Preston turned a page in his own folder. "I went through your background last night. Bachelor's from a state school. First job, customer support at a payments company in New Jersey. That's not a profile, Mr. Chase. That's a starting line. The question is whether anyone at the next level will see a starting line or a ceiling." Margaret leaned forward. Her thin old bracelet clicked against the wood. "Mr. Chase, you have been very successful at the edge of tech. But the world we are inviting you into is different. Dinners, legacy boards, conversations where the agenda is not on paper. People in that world will ask where you came from, and the answer will follow you. The structure we proposed is not a demotion. It is a translation. We are offering to translate you into a language those rooms understand." Julian felt something cool settle in his chest. Not anger, something steadier. You're telling me the company I built is acceptable. The numbers are acceptable. The technology is acceptable. The only thing about Vantage that is not acceptable is the man who built it. I would not put it in those words, Margaret said. You don't have to. The words are already in the room. Alistair raised one finger. Mr. Chase, there will not be another offer at this number. Not from us. Not from anyone in our circle. The doors my family closes do not reopen for the same man twice. I understand pride. But do you also understand that the people you are choosing to disappoint by walking away from a structure designed to protect you will not forget the choice? I understand that too. Then I'll ask you one final time. Operating chief of our selection, founder title preserved, 10 billion wired upon close, yes or no? Julian looked at Alistair, then at the table, then at the gray window where the morning had hardened into full daylight without anyone noticing. He closed his laptop. Not loudly, just enough that the sound carried. He stood up. Marcus stood with him. Julian placed both hands flat on the polished wood for a moment, the way a man does when he wants to remember the surface he is leaving behind. Mr. Carrington, he said, the answer is no. To the structure? Alistair asked. To the family. Julian walked the length of the table. No one stood to stop him. The news broke before Julian Chase reached his office. By the time he stepped out of the elevator, the first headline had already burned through 3 financial wires. Vantage, CEO walks from Carrington acquisition. $10 billion deal collapses. The phrasing was careful, passive, almost apologetic. The Carringtons had moved first. They wanted the story shaped before the market had time to ask what had really happened in that room. Marcus Webb stood at the window, 2 phones buzzing in his hands. 3 board members have called. 2 are nervous. 1 is furious. The investor relations line has stopped going to voicemail. The queue is full. The team? All hands at 3. They'll have heard by 2. Julian turned his chair toward the window. He thought about the borrowed router, the folding table he'd used as a desk for the first 18 months, the junior engineer who had taken a job because Julian had been honest about the risk. That engineer was now running infrastructure in Austin. He thought about the people who had stayed late when staying late was the only thing keeping the company alive. Then he picked up the phone. The first call was to Diana Morell. She was not a name the press knew. Diana ran a private innovation fund called Hartwell Group, quiet, disciplined, and responsible for backing 3 of the most resilient infrastructure companies of the past decade. Julian had met her twice. Both times, she had asked sharper questions in 5 minutes than the Carringtons had asked in 2 days. Her assistant put her on the line at 11:03. Julian, she said, I read the headlines. Most people will assume you made a mistake. I'd like to hear from you whether you did. That depends on what the mistake was supposed to prevent. A small sound on her end, something that might have been a laugh. Fair answer. I'll fly out tomorrow. I won't take more than an hour of your time. If after that hour you still want to be alone in this, I'll wish you well and disappear. If not, I'd like to talk about what an actual partner looks like for a company at your stage. 10 o'clock tomorrow. I'll clear the conference room. 10 works. The all-hands at 3 p.m. was the harder room. Julian stood at the front of the company cafeteria. Every chair was filled. Every railing on the upper floor was lined with employees who could not find seats. He did not use a slide deck. He did not prepare remarks. He told them what had happened. He told them what had been asked of him. An operating chief of the Carringtons' choosing, a founder title with no real authority, and what he had said in return. He told them the next 90 days would be uncertain, that some of the people in this room might decide the uncertainty was not worth carrying, and that he would not hold that decision against anyone. Then he told them one more thing. I did not build Vantage to belong to a name on a tower. I built it to belong to the people who stayed late on the nights when staying late was the only thing keeping the company alive. He said it once, plainly. Then he stopped talking. The room did not applaud. It did something better. It went quiet for a long moment. And then it went back to work. That night, Julian sat alone in his apartment with the lights off and the city blinking through the window. He thought about whether he had been right. The answer did not come quickly. When it came in the shape of a memory he had not visited in years. His mother, in their kitchen outside Albany, who had told him that the worst thing a man could trade was the part of himself that other people had not earned the right to ask for. He had been 22. He understood it now. Diana Morell arrived at 10 a.m. exactly. She wore no jewelry, carried no folder, shook his hand once with the firmness of someone who did not waste motion. The conversation that followed lasted 92 minutes. By the end of it, she had asked him 11 questions. None of them were about whether someone else had built the architecture. None of them were about his schooling. The first question she asked was about the worst hire he had ever made and what he had learned from it. The last question she asked was what he wanted Vantage to look like in 7 years, if no one in the room ever told him no. She offered him a structure that afternoon. Hartwell Group would lead a growth round. Julian would retain operating control, board majority, and full authority over the executive team. The valuation she put on the table was lower than $10 billion, significantly lower. But it was clean. There were no silent conditions. No parallel negotiations about who would translate him into anyone's room. He signed the term sheet within the week. The months that followed were not easy. 2 senior engineers left, citing the collapse of the Carrington deal as a signal of instability. Julian let them go without arguing. A small wave of clients asked for renegotiated terms. He granted those terms to the ones who asked in good faith and accepted the loss of the ones who did not. The financial press continued to frame his decision as a cautionary tale for most of the first quarter. Julian did not respond. He worked. By the end of the second quarter, the European corridor he had been building toward for 2 years began to open. A regulatory breakthrough in Frankfurt, one that had been waiting for the right operator, found Vantage instead of its competitors. A government contract in the Netherlands followed. By the third quarter, the company crossed a revenue threshold no one outside its leadership had publicly predicted. By the fourth quarter, a major bank's research note, the same bank that had once arranged a dinner between Julian and the Carringtons, listed Vantage as the most undervalued infrastructure asset of the year. Julian did not celebrate. He called Marcus into his office and said 2 words. "Keep going." Marcus nodded. He had seen every version of Julian, including the one who ate cold rice because payroll came first. This version, he later told someone, was the one he had been waiting for. 15 months after Julian Chase walked out of the Carrington Tower, Vantage Data Systems closed a strategic growth round at a valuation of $28 billion. The same financial outlets that had called his rejection reckless now ran profiles titled "The Founder Who Said No." Julian gave one interview. He refused to name the Carringtons directly. The difference between a buyer and a partner, he said, is visible in the first 10 minutes. Most people just don't want to look. Diana Morell remained on the board. Marcus Webb stayed as CFO. The original engineer from Austin flew in for the closing dinner and made a quiet toast. To Julian, for remembering whose name was on the door. The room nodded. That was better than applause. The Carringtons did not vanish. 6 months after Vantage's $28 billion valuation went public, an intermediary arrived with a careful message. Alistair Carrington wanted to discuss mutually beneficial alignment. Julian replied himself, "Mr. Carrington, thank you. Vantage is not seeking partners at this time. I wish you and your family well." 10 days later, Preston Carrington wrote directly. His tone had shifted, less condescension, more something that tried to sound like humility. He asked for an off-the-record conversation about what we could have done differently. Julian sat with that email for an evening. He thought about the pen tapping against the coffee cup, the smirk, the question about customer support in New Jersey. He replied with 2 sentences. "Mr. Carrington, the conversation you are looking for happened 15 months ago. You were in the room." He never heard from any of them again. The Carrington portfolio did not collapse. Families like theirs rarely collapsed. But something shifted. The next time a major infrastructure report named Vantage as a market leader, the Carrington name appeared in a smaller section. The next time a regulatory hearing in Brussels invited an American executive to speak on cross-border data policy, Julian was the one they called. The rooms Margaret Carrington had once said he would need to be translated into began sending their own invitations. Julian went to some. He wore the same suits, spoke the same way, did not apologize for where he came from. To his surprise, the rooms listened. One evening, nearly 2 years after the morning at the Carrington Tower, Julian stood alone in his office. The Manhattan skyline burned orange through the glass. He thought about the sheet of paper with 2 columns. The accept column had been longer: liquidity, European expansion, political doors. The walk column had been shorter, but it had carried more weight. The lesson arrived without effort. Not every large opportunity is worth taking. The real value of a deal is not the number on the page. It is whether the people across the table see you and respect what you see. Sometimes the most forward step into the future you actually want is to walk away from the most valuable thing you have been offered in the present. He thought of his mother's words in that Albany kitchen, that no one earns the right to buy the core of you. At 22, he had heard it. Now, he lived it. Marcus Webb knocked and stepped in. He held a single sheet of paper. "Carrington family office just sent this. It's not an offer. It's a note." Julian took it. The handwriting was old, Alistair's. "Mr. Chase, we misjudged you. That does not happen often. We will not make the same mistake again with others. You earned your name." Julian read it twice. Then he set it down. "What do you want to send back?" Marcus asked. "Nothing." "Nothing?" "Nothing says everything they need to hear." Marcus left. Julian turned to the window. The city below had not changed. He had. He thought about the engineers who had stayed, the clients who had trusted him, the investors who had believed in a man without a pedigree. He thought about the morning he had closed his laptop and walked out. He smiled. Not because he was happy, because he was free. He turned off the office lights. He picked up his coat. For the first time in 2 years, he went home before midnight. The next morning, a junior analyst at a major bank flagged a new entry in Vantage's public filing. Under key risks, Julian had added a single line. "The company's value is tied to the judgment of its founder. That judgment has been tested. It will be tested again. That is not a risk. That is the point." The analyst underlined it. Then she forwarded it to her entire team with 2 words. "Read this." On the 42nd floor of the Carrington Tower, the boardroom sat empty. The mahogany table had been polished again. The glasses had been refilled. But no one scheduled meetings there anymore. Not for infrastructure, not for deals above $10 billion. The room smelled the same. But the Carringtons had learned something they had never expected to learn. That some doors, once closed by pride, do not reopen. And that a man from a laundromat in Queens had taught them a lesson no business school could offer. Julian never told the story publicly, but late one night, over a drink with Diana Morell, he said one thing she never forgot. "They offered me $10 billion to become smaller," he said. "I walked away and became larger. That's not a contradiction. That's the only math that ever mattered." She raised his glass. He raised his. Somewhere below the Manhattan skyline, in an office with the lights off, a single sheet of paper with 2 columns sat in a drawer. The shorter column had 1. Hey everyone, thank you so much for watching this story. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe to my channel, Black Saga. Drop a comment below. Let me know where you're watching from. Like the video, share it with someone who needs to hear that saying no can be the most powerful move you'll ever make.